She only wanted to buy her son a birthday gift, but a luxury store slammed the door in her face. What they didn't know, she's Keanu Reeves's mother. And when Keanu finds out, his quiet response doesn't just expose the truth. It leaves the store owner begging for mercy in front of the entire world. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the soft clouds hovering over Beverly Hills. The streets shimmered with storefronts boasting names etched in gold. Windows filled with velvet displays and diamonds lit like they held fire. Among the gloss and bustle stood Patricia Reeves, her hands gently clasped around a folded piece of paper. Her blouse was pale lavender, clean but worn, and her shoes, though polished, showed the creases of years gone by. She stood outside the boutique for a moment, tilting her head slightly as if reading a silent invitation on the glass. The store's name was embossed in sleek, modern lettering, the type of place people drove up to in limousines, not on foot from a nearby bus stop. But Patricia wasn't intimidated. She had come with purpose. The list in her hand was small, handwritten, the ink slightly faded. At the top was a note. Keanu's birthday. Something elegant, something meaningful. She had spent the last week visiting a few shops, but nothing had felt right. Until a neighbor mentioned this boutique, known for custom pieces no other store carried. She took a breath and stepped forward. Inside, the boutique was quiet. White marble floors reflected every movement. A classical piece played softly in the background. Perfume lingered in the air like something too expensive to describe. Claire, the young boutique assistant in a sleek black dress, looked up from her phone as the door opened. Her eyes scanned Patricia in an instant. No jewelry, no designer bag, no heels, just an elderly woman with soft eyes and trembling hands. Claire moved quickly toward the door, intercepting her before Patricia could fully enter. "Excuse me," Claire said, positioning herself like a wall. Patricia offered a gentle smile. "I'm just looking to speak to someone about a custom gift for my son." Claire didn't smile back. Her voice was rehearsed, dismissive. "We're by private appointment only, for existing clients." Patricia glanced past her, seeing the store was nearly empty. "I can wait. I don't mind." Claire's gaze sharpened. "We don't do walk-ins. I'm sorry." The words weren't really sorry at all. They were flat, coated in cold. Patricia opened her mouth, hesitated, and then gently folded the list in her hand again. For a moment, her posture wilted, just slightly. Not enough to draw a crowd, but enough to carry the quiet weight of humiliation. Two women browsing near the jewelry case glanced over, then looked away. No one spoke. Patricia nodded. "All right, I understand." Her voice was as soft as her shoes. She turned back toward the sidewalk, each step measured, each one slower than the last. The door closed behind her with a hiss, and just like that, the boutique returned to its curated silence. But someone had noticed, just not who Claire expected. Isaac, Jamie Nguyen had been sitting on a bench across the street, earbuds in, backpack by his feet, waiting for his older sister to finish her shift at the coffee shop 2 doors down. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something about the way the older woman had stood outside the boutique caught his eye. She wasn't like the usual people who came to this part of town. Loud heels, loud phones, loud laughter. She was quiet, delicate, like someone trying to hold on to dignity in a place designed to strip it away. Jamie noticed the way the boutique girl stepped in front of her, cutting off the entrance before she could even take a second step. He couldn't hear the words from across the street, but the body language told the story. The slight lean forward, the guarded arms, the absence of welcome. Jamie pulled out his phone and hit record. He didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way the older woman looked down at her shoes before walking away, as if she needed a moment to steady herself. Or maybe it was because his grandmother had once told him, Respect isn't earned by a price tag. As the woman stepped away from the boutique, Jamie watched her pause at the corner. She didn't check her phone, didn't hail a cab. She just stood there with the folded piece of paper still clutched in her hand, her eyes blinking fast as if fighting something back. And then she walked on. Jamie stared at his screen. The video was less than 40 seconds, but it hit something deep. He posted it on his personal account without thinking too much. Captioned it, "Luxury store in Beverly Hills turns away elderly woman. She just wanted to buy a gift." He added no hashtags, no edits, just raw footage. And then he put his phone away and went inside the cafe to wait for his sister. That night, Patricia returned to her modest cottage, tucked in the valley, just east of the city's flash and noise. She placed her folded list on the kitchen counter and sat at the small round table where she'd written it. The house was warm, filled with books and photos of Keanu from every stage of life. One in particular sat framed near the kitchen window. Keanu at age 10, grinning with 2 missing teeth, standing next to her as she held a cake with crooked candles. She looked at that photo now, the corners of her mouth trembling in a smile that never reached her eyes. She whispered to no one. He would have laughed at that store. But she didn't tell him. She wouldn't. He had enough on his plate. This wasn't a crisis, it was just the world reminding her of her place. Or so she thought. By morning, Jamie's video had reached over 30,000 views. By lunchtime, it was crossing 100,000. Comments poured in from people all over the country, some furious, others heartbroken. Disgusting, you can see her kindness, and they just turned her away like garbage. This reminds me of when my mom was ignored at a bank. Same quiet sadness. Who is she? Anyone know? People began speculating about the woman's identity. Some thought she might be a retired actress. Others guessed she was a former teacher or someone's grandmother visiting from out of town. But no one knew the truth. Patricia Reeves was spending that morning folding laundry and sipping tea, unaware of the growing storm on the internet. She'd already made peace with what happened, or so she told herself. She wouldn't let a single moment define her worth. She believed that, mostly. But when she reached into her pocket later that day and felt the small folded list still tucked inside, something in her chest tightened. She hadn't even crossed one thing off. She looked at it again. Keanu's birthday. Something elegant, something meaningful. She opened a drawer and placed the list inside, next to an old velvet pouch from years past, and closed it gently. Meanwhile, across the city, Luna, Keanu's longtime assistant, sat in a sunlit office flipping through her morning alerts. She managed Keanu's calendar, press interactions, and filtered anything that wasn't urgent. But this headline stopped her cold. Elderly woman denied entry to boutique. Internet demands justice. She clicked the video, watched, rewatched, then froze on a frame. The hand, the tiny scar just above the thumb. Luna leaned forward. She recognized that hand. Her breath caught as she whispered, "No." She opened another photo, one of Patricia from a family brunch 2 years ago. The same eyes, the same quiet posture. She grabbed her phone and called Keanu directly. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Luna, are you alone?" she asked. "Yeah. Why?" "There's a video online. It's... Keanu, I think it's your mother." He was silent for a moment. "Send it," he said. Luna forwarded the clip, her hand slightly trembling. Keanu watched it in full. The angle was distant, the sound muted by traffic, but the image was clear enough. His mother, standing politely outside the boutique, turned away without cause, her steps slow as she left, the look in her eyes distant but controlled. He didn't blink for the full 40 seconds. When it ended, he simply closed his laptop and stood. "Cancel everything this afternoon," he said. Luna didn't ask questions. She already knew, and in that moment, What had begun as a casual act of cruelty would set off a chain reaction that neither the boutique nor the world was ready for. By the time most of Los Angeles was sipping their second coffee, the video had crossed 500,000 views. What started on Jamie's small personal feed had been reposted by dozens of major accounts. The image was striking. A woman in her late 70s, gently dressed, clearly dignified, being turned away by a polished employee in a luxury boutique. The audio wasn't necessary. Her posture said it all. The world had seen humiliation before. But this was quiet dismissal, the kind that left bruises on the soul instead of the skin. Headlines sprang up fast. Elderly woman denied entry at boutique. Ageism or classism? Who is she, the internet wants to know? Everly Hills store sparks outrage over viral video. Comments flooded in. Heartbreaking to watch. She didn't even fight back, just accepted it. Imagine treating someone's grandma like this. I don't care how exclusive your brand is, this is just plain wrong. Others turned it into memes, still images with sarcastic captions. Some mocked her shoes, her blouse. But those were quickly drowned by thousands of voices defending her. The more it spread, the more divided the internet became, between those who saw a moment of quiet injustice and those who dismissed it as overblown. Then came the store's first official response, posted mid-morning on their verified account. We are aware of the circulating video and are investigating. This appears to have been a misunderstanding. Our brand welcomes all clients and upholds the highest standards of service. It wasn't enough. Not close. Influencers began unfollowing the store. Celebrities chimed in with vague statements about dignity and compassion. One actor tweeted, "If my mom had been treated like that, you'd never see me smile again." Still, no one knew the woman's name, until Luna recognized the hands. She sat alone in Keanu's home office, sifting through flagged media, and paused the video frame by frame. It wasn't just the way the woman stood. It was how she touched her necklace, as if checking to make sure it hadn't slipped. Luna had seen that gesture before. 20, maybe 30 times, Patricia Reeves had always worn the same necklace. A locket with a photo of Keanu as a child inside. Luna pulled up an old photo from Keanu's mother's birthday party 3 years ago. Same delicate chain, same way she tilted her head when listening. It was her. There was no doubt. She picked up the phone. Her voice was steady but tight. "Keanu, I need to show you something. It's about the video." He answered, and she heard only silence on the other end as he clicked the link she sent. He didn't speak for almost a full minute. Luna heard only the faint ambient hum of his room in the background. In a quiet breath, "I need to go see her." Keanu stood still, the laptop screen glowing softly in the quiet room. The video played again, this time slower. He watched the way his mother hesitated at the door, the careful posture, her folded hands. He noticed the list she gripped in her right palm, the same notepad she always used for birthdays and holiday errands. The way she turned and walked away without complaint, like someone who had learned long ago that protest wouldn't change anything. He froze the frame, where her eyes lowered and she tucked the list back into her purse. The locket around her neck caught the light. That was the confirmation. That was the moment he felt something sharp rise in his chest. Anger, yes, but more than that, sadness. A profound grief that anyone could look at her and not see the life she carried, the years she had lived, the sacrifices she had made. His mother had walked through fire for him, raised him with borrowed money and whispered encouragements. She had never asked for recognition, never wanted the world to see her. He closed the laptop softly, not slamming it, not storming out. He turned to Luna, who had stayed quiet on the call. "Cancel my afternoon," he said calmly. "Of course," Luna replied. "I'm going to see her." As Keanu hung up, Luna sat motionless for a moment. She'd worked with him for years, seen him in moments of heartbreak, exhaustion, even anger. But this was different. There was a stillness in his voice that only came when something had gone far deeper than pride. Meanwhile, the boutique was doing damage control. Franklin Braith, the boutique's owner, had sent an internal memo to all staff urging them not to speak publicly. A second statement was issued. "We regret any confusion surrounding the incident. Our brand values inclusivity and strives to serve with excellence." But the public wasn't buying it. A popular influencer stitched the original video with a message. "Let's be honest. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision. You saw someone you thought wasn't worth your time." More stories began to surface. Anonymous reviews emerged. Other older customers, quiet ones, modestly dressed, describing similar treatment. The store's rating plummeted. Photos of Claire, the employee at the door, circulated quickly. She received threats and overwhelming criticism. Some said she deserved it. Others argued she was a symptom of a larger problem. But no one knew what was coming. Because Keanu Reeves didn't respond on Twitter, he didn't post an Instagram story, he didn't give a press statement. He got in his car and drove across the city to his mother's home, where the lights were still dim and her heart was still quietly breaking in ways no headline could capture. Patricia was watering the small lavender plants on her porch when she heard the quiet hum of a familiar engine approaching. She looked up to see Keanu's car slowing near the curb. He stepped out, dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans. No cameras, no entourage, just her son. He didn't smile. He walked straight to her and gently placed his hands on her shoulders, looking into her eyes like he was trying to read something she hadn't said aloud. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice low and gentle, as if nothing had happened. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. She looked down, then slowly walked back to the porch railing, setting the watering can aside. "I didn't want to be a burden," she said softly. "You're busy. You have enough people demanding your attention. I didn't want to be another headline in your life." "You're not a headline, Mom," he said. "You're the reason I survived those years." She shook her head slightly, still trying to smile through the embarrassment. It was silly. Just a moment. They didn't know me. They don't owe me anything. "You deserve respect," Keanu said, his voice tightening. "That's not something people get to decide based on shoes and a blouse." Patricia reached for his hand and squeezed it. "It's all right now. I'm home. I had a good cry, and I'm fine." But Keanu wasn't. He sat beside her, listening as she tried to minimize the hurt. She told him how she had made a little list, how she had wanted to find something special for his birthday, how she didn't even get past the front door. "I kept thinking, what if it were someone else?" she said finally. "Someone who didn't have anyone to come home to. What then?" Keanu didn't speak right away. His eyes scanned the garden, the sunlight flickering through the leaves, the wind brushing against her silver hair. "I saw the video," he said. Her breath caught. "It's going viral," he added. "They don't know it's you." Patricia looked away, her face growing pale. "I didn't want anyone to know," she said. "Please, don't make this into a thing. It'll pass." But Keanu stood, not angry, not loud, just grounded, unshakable. "I'm not going to shame anyone," he said, "but I won't let this slide into silence either. You taught me to stand up for people who can't. Now it's my turn." Patricia watched him walk down the steps and pause at the gate. She knew that look, that calm fire in his eyes. The world had seen Keanu Reeves in many forms, on red carpets, on movie sets, in acts of generosity whispered between strangers. But they had never seen him like this. And the people who thought they could dismiss a woman like her were about to learn what true class looked like. One quiet step at a time. Keanu stopped by the cafe down the road before heading to his mother's house. He knew what she liked. Whole wheat turkey sandwich, light mustard, no onions. And black coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. The staff didn't recognize him, just another man in a baseball cap and hoodie. He preferred it that way. As he drove into the quiet neighborhood tucked in the valley, the noise of the outside world faded. The trees arched gently over the road like old friends, their leaves rustling with a soft rhythm. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where people still waved at their neighbors. It had always felt like a safe haven. Patricia's house was modest but warm, tucked behind a white picket fence with blue shutters and rose bushes she trimmed herself. Wind chimes tinkled near the porch, and a stack of library books sat in a basket by the door. Keanu stepped out of the car, holding the sandwich and coffee like a peace offering, though he wasn't sure if there had even been a war. She opened the door before he knocked. "You always bring lunch," she said with a small smile. "Some things are sacred," he replied, handing her the brown paper bag. They sat in her kitchen, sun pouring through the lace curtains. The table was set simply: 2 ceramic plates, a folded napkin with tiny violets printed along the edge. A candle sat unlit in the center. Patricia opened the bag and unwrapped the sandwich, taking small, polite bites as if nothing had changed. She asked about his filming schedule, about Luna, about whether he was getting enough sleep. Not a word about the video, not a mention of Beverly Hills. Keanu listened patiently, sipping his coffee, waiting for the right moment. It came in the stillness between her questions. When she paused to wipe a crumb from the table with the corner of her napkin, her hands slightly trembling. "Mom," he said gently, "can we talk about what happened?" Her eyes didn't lift. "What do you mean?" "The boutique," he said. "I saw the video." A long silence followed. She folded the napkin tighter, then placed it flat on the table again. "I didn't want you to see that," she whispered. "Where?" She looked up at him finally. "Because it doesn't matter." He leaned forward, his voice soft. "It matters to me." She inhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a moment like someone bracing for the cold. Then, very quietly, she said, "I didn't want to embarrass you." That sentence landed like a weight between them. He reached across the table and took her hand. It was small and thin, the skin soft but fragile, like parchment paper. "You could never do that," he said, his voice firm and steady. She looked at him with watery eyes, and this time, she didn't hold the tears back. The tears didn't fall in a rush. They slipped out one by one, like she was letting go of something heavy she'd carried for far too long. Patricia didn't sob or collapse. She just sat there, her shoulders barely moving, her hand still in her son's. "They made me feel like trash," she whispered. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't speak yet. He simply held her hand tighter. "I walked all the way down that boulevard like I was someone," she continued, her voice trembling. "I thought, maybe if I found the right thing, something thoughtful, you'd wear it at one of those events. Not because it's expensive, just because it came from me." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with quiet fire behind the calm. "You always give me the right thing," he said. "You gave me everything I ever needed. I'm who I am because of you." She shook her head slightly, brushing a tissue against her cheek. "That's kind of you to say, but they didn't see that. They saw someone who didn't belong, someone with old shoes and soft hands. They looked through me." He nodded slowly, the silence thickening between them. "Then we show them who you are," he said. "I don't want revenge, Keanu," she added quickly. "I don't want cameras or reporters. I don't want to be a symbol for anything." He leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "This isn't about making noise. It's about reminding people how to be human." She looked down, her thumb absent-mindedly brushing the rim of the coffee cup, the same one she always used, with faded flowers on the side and a chip near the handle. "I keep wondering," she said, almost to herself, "what if I hadn't smiled? What if I had gotten angry instead? Would they have respected me then?" "No," Keanu said quietly, "because they weren't looking for your worth. They were looking for your wallet." Patricia let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. "It's funny," she said. "All those years I told you not to judge people by what they wear, what they drive, and now, here I am letting it break me." "It didn't break you," he said. It just reminded you of how fragile people can be. That's not weakness, Mom. That's what makes you stronger than any of them. She looked at him again, her eyes clearer now. You've always had a way with words, she said, just like your father. Keanu gave a small smile, but it faded quickly. He wasn't thinking about the past. He was thinking about the boutique, about the girl at the door, about the millions of people who had already seen that clip. But more than anything, he was thinking about all the people who hadn't, people who needed to, and he was going to make sure they did. They sat in the living room for a while, the late afternoon light spilling across the floor like honey. Patricia had brought out a small tin of almond cookies. Keanu took one, more for her than himself. The silence between them wasn't heavy now. It was something softer, something healing. Patricia pulled a worn photo album from the nearby shelf and placed it on the coffee table. The spine cracked as she opened it. "Do you remember this?" she asked, pointing to a faded picture of a much younger Keanu with a crooked tie and scraped knees, beaming as he held a handmade birthday card. He chuckled softly. "I do. That was the year I tried to bake you a cake and forgot the sugar." She smiled. "You brought me burnt flour and determination. Still one of my favorite birthdays." He flipped through a few more pages. There were pictures of her holding him as a baby, pictures of them in their old apartment, and one of her standing beside a tiny tree she had planted in the backyard, now tall and strong outside the kitchen window. "That's where I got it from," he said quietly. "What?" It's stillness, that way of carrying pain without letting it own you. She tilted her head. "That's not stillness, Keanu. That's practice." He nodded. "Then you're a master." For a long while, neither of them said much. The weight of what had happened still lingered, but it no longer defined the space. Keanu stood eventually, stretched his back, and walked toward the kitchen. He opened a cabinet, pulled out a notepad, and scribbled something quickly. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "What are you writing?" He tore off the page, folded it, and slipped it into his pocket. "Just a reminder," he said. Before leaving, he turned to her one last time at the door. "You don't need to hide pain from me, Mom. Not ever. I'd rather carry it with you than let you walk through it alone." She touched his cheek, that same gesture she'd done since he was a boy. Gentle, grounding. "I know," she whispered. "And I love you for it." He kissed her forehead and stepped out into the soft dusk, where the air smelled like jasmine and the wind was beginning to change. As he drove away, Patricia stood at the window, watching the taillights fade. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel humiliated. She felt seen. And somewhere deep inside, she understood something more clearly than ever before. Sometimes, a single act of cruelty reveals a deeper kind of grace. Not in the moment of pain, but in how someone chooses to carry it forward. And her son was already walking that road. The next morning, Keanu sat across from Luna in his quiet home office, a half-drunk cup of coffee cooling beside him. The video of his mother was still being shared across social media. It had reached millions now, appearing in news segments, reaction videos, and morning talk shows. His phone buzzed with message after message. Publicists, producers, friends, even strangers reaching out to ask for a statement, to offer support, or simply to say how sorry they were. Luna brought a printed media strategy to the table. She laid it out carefully, but didn't push it. "We could release a public response," she said gently. "We'd control the narrative, say it was your mother, say it hurt, and make it clear that this kind of behavior isn't acceptable anywhere." He looked down at the paper, then back at her. "That's not why I care," he said. "I don't need the world to know she's my mom to be outraged." Luna nodded. "Then what do you want to do?" He leaned back in his chair. "I want to understand who's responsible." She pulled her laptop closer and tapped a few keys. "The store is owned by Franklin Braith," she said. "Used to run a major fashion house. Got booted after some internal scandals and resurfaced with this boutique line 5 years ago." Keanu raised an eyebrow. What kind of scandals? Verbal abuse, elitist policies, toxic workplace culture. None of it ever stuck. But people in the industry know who he is. He's obsessed with image and exclusivity. Keanu let that sit in the air for a moment. Luna continued, "We could go public with it, pressure the brand, turn the story into something bigger, corporate accountability, social discrimination, all of it." But Keanu shook his head. "I'm not looking to shame anyone," he said. "That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" she asked. He looked toward the window, where the sunlight was just beginning to fill the room. "It's about respect. Quiet, basic respect. The kind people deserve without having to prove anything." Luna sat back, closing her laptop. "So what do you want to do?" Keanu stood slowly, grabbed his coat from the back of the chair, and checked his phone for the address. "I want to meet him." The man who made the rules. Franklin Braith's boutique sat nestled in the heart of Beverly Hills, its exterior framed by tall hedges and tinted glass. The logo was understated, almost cold, just 2 silver initials over black granite. Inside, the space was curated to intimidate. White stone floors, silent staff, carefully positioned mannequins in $1,000 outfits, and music so soft it barely existed. Keanu knew the type. He didn't bother calling ahead. He didn't alert his team. He didn't bring press or bodyguards. That wasn't the point. He pulled up in a modest sedan, parked 2 blocks away, and walked the rest of the way in plain clothes. A black cap, clean jeans, a simple gray t-shirt. Nothing flashy. He paused outside the glass door for just a moment, taking it all in. People passed by with shopping bags and sunglasses, none of them noticing him. He stepped inside. The store's atmosphere shifted the moment he entered, but not for the reasons the staff thought. They didn't recognize him. Yet. They just saw a man walking in alone, unannounced, with no visible luxury brand on him. The receptionist looked up and did a double take, her eyes narrowing. Keanu walked past without a word, slowly browsing the displays. Jewelry cases, custom leather, cufflinks priced higher than some people's rent. He wasn't looking for anything to buy. He was looking for the man behind it. One of the junior associates approached him, her heels clicking softly. "Sir, are you looking for something in particular?" she asked, her tone professional but clipped. He smiled politely. "Just looking." The associate hesitated, clearly unsure of whether to offer help or ask him to leave, but then a door in the back opened, and Franklin Braith stepped out, laughing at something someone said behind him. He was older than Keanu expected, probably late 60s, but sharp. His silver hair was combed precisely, and his suit looked tailored to intimidate. He walked like someone who had built his world brick by brick and didn't care who bled during the process. He glanced toward the stranger near the cufflinks, nodded dismissively, and turned to speak with his assistant. Then he did a double take. The smile on his face faded. His assistant whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves." Franklin's eyes narrowed, his posture straightened. And then, with a tight breath, he walked over to greet the man he never expected to see. Franklin extended his hand with a smooth, practiced smile, the kind built over decades of handshakes and headlines. "Mr. Reeves," he said, as if the greeting itself was a performance. "What an unexpected pleasure. I trust you're being taken care of?" Keanu looked at the hand for a moment, then shook it lightly. "I'm fine." Franklin motioned toward a sitting area made of glass and chrome. "Let's talk. I assume you're here about the video?" Keanu followed but didn't sit right away. His eyes scanned the space, taking in every detail. Every chair, every polished surface, every bit of silence meant to create distance between those who could belong and those who couldn't. "I'm not here for an apology," he said finally. Franklin raised an eyebrow. "No? I'm here to understand how someone like my mother could be turned away so easily." Franklin's smile froze. "We don't condone discrimination of any kind. That was an unfortunate misunderstanding." She made a list in her hand, Keanu said calmly. She told your employee she was there to buy a gift. She wasn't disruptive. She didn't wander in off the street. She was turned away the moment they looked at her. Franklin spread his hands. We have private labor policies. Our team is trained to manage the brand's exclusivity. It's delicate. Delicate, Keanu repeated. Is that what you call it? He finally sat, folding his hands. I'm not here to ruin you or demand anything, but I am watching, and so are a lot of other people. What happened isn't just about her. It's about how many others have been turned away without a camera nearby. Franklin leaned back, trying to regain his footing. Mr. Reeves, I respect your concern. I do, but you have to understand. There's a certain clientele we serve. That's the world we operate in. No, Keanu said. That's the world you choose to operate in. Franklin's face tightened. Keanu leaned forward slightly. My mother doesn't need your store. She has nothing to prove. But the next time you look someone up and down and decide who they are based on a shirt or a pair of shoes, I want you to remember this moment. Franklin crossed his arms, trying to stay composed. Are you threatening me? Keanu shook his head. If I were, this would already be over. There was silence. Then Keanu stood and looked around the boutique one last time. You built a business to impress the powerful, he said quietly. I hope someday you build one that respects the quiet. He didn't wait for a response. He walked out, past the same employee who had turned away his mother, past the glass door, into the bright California sun. Outside, a small group of shoppers stood frozen, some whispering, others filming. The internet had already caught wind that Keanu Reeves was at the boutique. People were starting to talk. More cameras would be there soon. Keanu didn't say a word to them. He walked calmly to his car and drove away. Back inside, Franklin stood still for a moment, staring at the door. His assistant hovered nearby, waiting for instructions. What do we do? She asked. Franklin didn't answer right away. He stared into the display case beside him, the cufflinks still catching light. And for the first time in years, he didn't like what he saw looking back. Keanu returned to the boutique 2 days later, this time without a name or face to rely on. No appointment, no press, no warning. He parked the same sedan on a side street and pulled a baseball cap over his head. Worn jeans, a simple long-sleeve shirt, sneakers. No watch, no sunglasses. He looked like any man running errands, someone blending in on purpose. As he stepped through the boutique doors, he glanced at the floor, the same cold marble that had reflected his mother's quiet departure. The store hadn't changed. Everything gleamed like it had been polished twice that morning. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume, and the classical music still played, soft and detached. Claire was at the counter, rearranging a tray of perfume bottles. She looked up briefly as the door chimed, but gave him only a half-second glance before returning to her task. Her eyes didn't widen. No recognition, no welcome. Keanu moved slowly through the store, scanning each display. He passed 2 women in designer coats, sipping complimentary champagne. They didn't notice him either. A staff member offered one of the women a tray of exclusive earrings, describing them as limited to only 7 pieces worldwide. No one approached Keanu. No one offered a drink. No one asked if he needed help. He stopped near a display case of delicate necklaces, the kind his mother used to admire when they'd walk past jewelry stores together on Sundays. He bent slightly to get a closer look. Overhead, he spotted a discreet security camera nestled into the molding above the register. He smiled faintly. So they were watching. He reached for one of the necklaces, a silver chain with a small sapphire pendant. It reminded him of the kind his mother would never buy for herself. Too extravagant, she'd say. As he held it carefully between his fingers, a man in a fitted black suit appeared beside him. Not the warm welcome of a customer service rep, but the cold caution of someone trying to figure out if he was about to become a problem. "Can I help you with something?" the man asked, his tone polite but tight. Keanu looked up at him, then down at the necklace again. He spoke quietly, almost kindly. "Just looking," he said, "for someone special." The man didn't respond right away. His eyes lingered on Keanu's shirt, then dropped to his shoes. His posture didn't shift into service. It stayed guarded. "Well," he said with a tight smile, "if you're just browsing, I'll give you some space. But please don't handle the jewelry without a consultant present." Keanu nodded without irritation. "Of course." The man stepped back, but not far. He remained within eyeshot, hovering like a shadow. Keanu returned the necklace gently to its place, noting the way the staff seemed more alert now. Not helpful, just observant, watching without welcoming. Claire glanced up again from the counter. This time she noticed the man in the black suit keeping a subtle watch. She followed his gaze to Keanu and furrowed her brow slightly. She still didn't recognize him. Or maybe she was trying to place him but couldn't reconcile the outfit with the memory. She leaned over and whispered something to a colleague. Keanu slowly moved to another section of the boutique, one with vintage brooches and lapel pins, the kind of accessories his mother had always admired in magazine ads but never owned. Behind him, another couple entered, clearly affluent, a woman in heels, her husband in a tailored jacket. Instantly, the energy shifted. The staff sprang into motion, two associates moving in to offer champagne, hang up coats, and begin suggesting items before they had even made it to the back wall. Keanu watched from the corner of his eye. The contrast was sharp, loud. He could have laughed if it weren't so familiar. A moment later, a different staff member approached him, not with kindness, just with protocol. "Sir, are you looking for something specific today?" "No," Keanu replied simply, "just browsing." The man gave a courteous nod, but his eyes were already elsewhere. His expression said what he didn't say out loud. "You don't belong here." Keanu wandered back toward the register, pausing for a moment to glance at a glass tray of rings. Above it, the security camera still blinked softly. He knew it had captured every second of this visit, every glance, every dismissal. And for the second time in that store, a Reeves had been judged by appearance alone. Only this time, it wouldn't go unnoticed. Keanu made his way to the far end of the boutique, where a glass cabinet displayed antique lockets. One of them, delicately engraved and slightly tarnished with age, caught his eye. It reminded him of the one his mother wore, the one with his childhood photo inside. He stood there for a long moment, not saying a word. Behind him, Claire finally decided to approach. She had sensed enough unease from the team to warrant a closer look. Her heels echoed softly as she stepped up beside him. "Sir," she said, her tone brisk but polite, "can I assist you with something from this section? These are part of our legacy collection. Appointment only." Keanu turned toward her and looked her in the eyes. She froze. Her breath caught. Recognition swept across her face like a sudden gust of cold air. The jawline, the voice, the eyes. The man she had brushed off days ago was standing in front of her again, but this time, not as an anonymous stranger. "Mr. Reeves," she stammered, her voice barely audible, I didn't realize." "I know," Keanu said softly. Claire blinked, her mouth opening and closing, but the words didn't come. The room felt heavier now. Associates across the floor had turned their attention toward the interaction, sensing the shift. Even the store manager, still stationed by the register, had straightened his posture. "You didn't recognize me," Keanu continued, "just like you didn't recognize her." Claire's hands trembled slightly. I thought, especially not after what you said, As. There is no difference." "You thought she didn't belong," he said, "because of her shoes, because of her age, because she walked in alone." Claire's face turned pale. Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I was just following procedure. You were doing what you've been trained to do," Keanu said gently, "and that's the problem." He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. People had started whispering. One customer pulled out their phone, subtly recording. Others watched in silence, sensing that something important was unfolding. Not a confrontation, but a reckoning. Keanu stepped back from the glass case and looked around the boutique once more. "This isn't about me," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "This is about how many people walk into places like this every day and are told, silently or directly, that they don't matter." He paused, letting that truth land. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," he said, "but I want you all to know. She mattered. My mother. She walked into this store with grace and dignity, and you couldn't see past her cardigan." Claire covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes were wet now. The store manager looked shaken, unsure if he should intervene or stay silent. Keanu looked up at the camera once more. "I hope that tape is saved," he said, "because one day maybe someone will study it. Not for scandal, but for understanding. For proof of what judgment looks like in real time." Then he turned back to Claire. "I'm not angry," he said gently. "I just want you to see people, not their outfits, not their credit scores, just people." He walked slowly toward the exit. No one stopped him. As the boutique door closed behind him, no applause followed. Just silence. A rare kind of silence. The kind that follows a truth too loud to ignore. And in that stillness, something began to shift. Not just in the store, but in every person who had witnessed what quiet power really looked like. The boutique had just begun to settle again. Claire stood frozen at the counter, her shoulders tense and her breathing uneven. The other staff moved quietly now, their chatter silenced, their confidence shaken. The man in denim had spoken like thunder through a whisper, and none of them had any idea what to do next. Then the door chimed again. Franklin Braith entered the boutique with a booming laugh, one arm around a man in a tailored navy suit, the kind of client who never looked at price tags. The two of them shared some inside joke as they stepped through the entrance, Franklin waving off the heat outside like it was beneath him. His suit was ivory linen, crisp and expensive, his sunglasses gold-rimmed and slightly crooked from wear, like he didn't need them to be perfect, because in his mind, he already was. He didn't notice the tension right away. Franklin strode through the space like he owned more than just the boutique. He owned the air in it, the silence it held, the energy it radiated. He was halfway through greeting another customer when he saw Claire standing still, eyes wide, her face pale. "What's going on?" he asked casually, stepping closer. Claire leaned toward him, her voice hushed and uncertain. "There was a man. He came in alone, denim, ball cap, looked out of place. Spoke to me and then just left." Franklin's smile faded slightly. "What do you mean, looked out of place?" He was holding jewelry. Staff thought he was acting odd. "Where is he now?" "He'll just walked out." Franklin glanced toward the door, his eyes narrowing. "Did you get his name?" "No," Claire whispered. "But Franklin, he knew what happened with the older woman, the one from the video. He said it was his mother." Franklin stiffened. He walked briskly toward the glass doors and stepped outside, scanning the sidewalk. The man in denim was still there, not far, standing quietly under the shade of a tree. Franklin strode toward him with the same confident air he used at fashion shows and fundraisers. He didn't recognize the man's face. Yet, all he saw was the clothing, the stance, a non-customer loitering near the entrance. And that's when he made the mistake. Franklin walked up to Keanu with measured authority, the kind used to brush off reporters and discipline junior staff. He stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, chin lifted slightly. Keanu remained quiet, still standing beneath the tree, his cap low over his eyes, his posture relaxed but unshakable. "Excuse me," Franklin said sharply. "Can I help you?" Keanu didn't respond right away. He looked up, just slightly, the edge of his jaw visible beneath the bill of his cap. "If you're not planning to make a purchase," Franklin continued, "I'm going to have to ask you to move along." A woman walking by slowed her pace, catching the energy of the moment. Keanu gave the slightest tilt of his head, then reached up and removed the cap. Gasps broke the silence. Two people at the cafe across the street froze mid-conversation. A young woman just exiting the boutique stopped and stared. Inside, Claire stood like a statue behind the counter, her mouth parted, as if the air had left the room. Franklin blinked, his lips parted. Keanu looked him in the eyes. "You know," he said quietly, "if I were anyone else, you wouldn't even be speaking to me." Franklin took half a step back. "Mr. Reeves," he said quickly, recovering with a politician's poise, "I didn't realize." "You didn't need to realize," Keanu replied. "You just needed to treat people like human beings." The words landed heavy, not shouted, not even raised, just steady and devastating. Franklin opened his mouth to respond, but nothing coherent came out. Behind them, someone began recording. A few more phones were raised silently, capturing the moment. Keanu didn't flinch. "My mother came to your store. She wasn't loud. She wasn't demanding. She had a list in her hand and kindness in her voice." Franklin was visibly uncomfortable now. His usual charisma was cracking around the edges. The boutique's carefully guarded reputation stood exposed, no longer in curated lighting, but beneath the full weight of daylight and truth. Keanu stepped forward once more. Me walked away embarrassed. "You don't get to clean that up with a press release." Franklin swallowed hard, now fully realizing the damage wasn't just reputational. It was personal, and it was public. Franklin adjusted his jacket, forcing a strained smile, as if the cameras weren't starting to point in his direction. "Mr. Reeves, I deeply regret the experience your mother had. If I had known..." Keanu raised his hand gently, stopping him. "You didn't need to know who she was. You only needed to know that she was someone. That should have been enough." People were now gathering nearby, some pretending to browse store windows just to stay close, others holding their phones more openly. A few whispered his name with wide eyes. Franklin noticed it all. His world ran on perception, and this one was slipping beyond his control. "I'd like to offer my personal apology," Franklin said, his voice dropping into a polished sincerity. "We'd be honored to welcome her back properly this time." The employee, Keanu, didn't move. "You're not listening," he said, still calm. "This was never about apologies or headlines. I didn't come here to rescue her. She doesn't need rescuing. She needs to live in a world where people like you don't decide her worth based on how expensive her purse looks." Franklin's mouth tightened. "This is a misunderstanding that's being blown out of proportion." "No," Keanu said. "It's not a misunderstanding. It's a mirror, and whether or not you like what you see is up to you." Claire had stepped outside now, just beyond the threshold of the boutique. Her face was drained of color. She looked between the two men, realizing that everything she'd been trained to value, polish, image, hierarchy, was crumbling in front of her. One of the younger associates inside was crying quietly, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. Keanu turned back toward the street, as if preparing to leave. Franklin called out one more time, "Mr. Reeves, what do you want?" Keanu looked over his shoulder. To know that the next time someone walks into your store, they aren't asked to prove their worth. "That's it." Franklin had no response. Keanu nodded slightly and began walking down the sidewalk, not rushed, not dramatic, just certain. The crowd parted as he passed. Not a single word needed to be said. The video of that exchange would be seen by tens of millions before the sun set. Not because it was viral, but because it was true. Back inside the boutique, Franklin stood in silence, surrounded by mirrors that now felt like interrogation lights. Claire walked past him without a word and returned to the counter. No one greeted the next customer. No one offered champagne. And outside, a man in worn jeans walked into the noise of the world with the quiet strength of someone who didn't need power to be powerful. The first upload hit social media just 40 minutes after Keanu walked away from the boutique. The video, taken by a woman named Tasha who had been across the street sipping coffee, showed the entire exchange. From the moment Franklin Braith stepped outside to the instant Keanu removed his cap, every second was captured in crisp audio and framed by the clear shock on the faces around them. Tasha's caption read, "Keanu Reeves just stood up for someone at this Beverly Hills boutique. No yelling, no drama, just dignity." Within hours, it had over 2 million views. By that evening, it was on the homepage of every major news site. Morning talk shows began rerunning the clip with commentary. The headlines exploded. Keanu Reeves denied respect, so he teaches a masterclass in grace. Actor silently exposes elitism in Beverly Hills boutique. Beans. The quiet power of kindness. Keanu's response goes viral. The public couldn't stop talking about the moment. It wasn't just what Keanu said, it was how he said it. There was no anger, no personal attack, just truth. And it hit harder than any staged protest or PR campaign ever could. Clips were reposted with voiceovers, breakdowns, reactions. Influencers called it one of the most important celebrity moments of the year. A pastor in Chicago used the footage as the opening to his Sunday sermon on humility. A teacher in Boston showed it to her civics class, and at the center of all the noise was Patricia Reeves. Someone online connected the dots. They posted side-by-side photos, one of the elderly woman being turned away, the other of her standing beside Keanu at a charity event years prior. The caption read, "Turns out she's his mom, and they still told her she didn't belong." That post alone racked up nearly 20 million impressions. People weren't just talking about Keanu anymore. They were talking about her. About what it meant to grow old in a world that stopped seeing you. About what it meant to be kind, soft-spoken, and still invisible in a space that measured value in designer labels. And without saying a single word to the public, Patricia Reeves had become a quiet symbol. Memes began to appear, but not the mocking kind. They were reverent, almost poetic. A photo of Patricia looking down at her folded list was overlaid with the words, "She didn't need luxury, she had grace." Another showed Keanu's calm face beside the boutique door, with the caption, "Power is how you treat people when no one's watching." Even celebrities who rarely spoke out started reposting the clip. A legendary singer tweeted, "I've walked into places where they assumed I didn't belong. This hit me harder than I expected." The well-known author added, "If your idea of exclusivity depends on exclusion, you've misunderstood everything." Franklin Braith was quick to react. His PR team issued a formal apology on the boutique's account. "We are deeply sorry for the experience Mrs. Patricia Reeves endured in our store. We take full responsibility and are reviewing all internal policies to ensure this never happens again." He followed it up with a press release announcing a new charitable initiative, a donation to a senior dignity foundation, and plans to host open door days for the public. But the internet didn't buy it. Screenshots of Franklin laughing with wealthy clients from just days earlier were recirculated alongside his apology. A former employee anonymously posted that staff had long been trained to assess customers by appearance. Others came forward too. Quiet stories of rejection, subtle cruelty, and unspoken bias. The footage had made one thing impossible to deny. This wasn't just one mistake. It was a culture. And no amount of money or press-crafted remorse could erase the rawness of the video. Keanu hadn't humiliated anyone. He didn't need to. The contrast between his quiet dignity and the boutique's arrogance did all the talking. When approached for interviews, Keanu declined them all. Reporters tried. Network anchors left voicemails. A major publication offered a feature spread. But Keanu said the same thing to every request. This isn't a campaign. It's a reminder. He didn't want it to be about him. And he certainly didn't want it to turn into some brand of personal victory. He just wanted people to see what they had missed the first time. Back at her home in the valley, Patricia sat on her porch, unaware at first of the firestorm surrounding her. She didn't have social media. The television in her living room was rarely turned on. But the mail started to arrive. Cards, letters, handwritten notes from strangers across the country. One envelope simply read, "To the woman who reminded us how to be human." Inside was a single sentence. "My mother passed last year. She would have loved you." A woman from Oregon wrote, "They turned you away, but you turned us toward ourselves." Patricia held the letters like they were fragile glass, reading each one slowly, pressing them against her chest, before placing them gently in a shoebox beside her chair. When Keanu came by that weekend with groceries and coffee, she showed him the box. He sat beside her on the porch steps, quietly looking through the stack. "They've made you into something," he said. She chuckled. "That's their business. You don't want it." "I didn't ask for it." She glanced toward the lavender bush, just beginning to bloom again. "I'm not angry, Keanu, not anymore." He looked at her carefully. "I know," he said, "but they needed to see it. They needed to feel what I felt." She reached for his hand. "You've always seen people, even as a child. You noticed when someone looked tired. You noticed when someone didn't have lunch at school. You never needed a reason to be kind." He gave a small smile. "You gave me that." The world continued spinning fast around them. News outlets dissected the footage. Analysts talked about celebrity accountability and retail elitism. But through all the noise, one truth remained unshakable. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the quiet reckoning of a society too comfortable with judging worth through lenses of fabric, cost, and age. That week, college campuses held open forums on ageism and class perception. A clothing company launched a campaign called "Dignity Wears Every Size." An author began writing a book on retail bias, inspired by Patricia's experience. And still, Keanu declined to make it about himself. He went back to filming, to his usual routines. But something had changed. People who saw him on the street didn't just shout his name. They lowered their voices. They thanked him. They said his silence had spoken, louder than a speech ever could. One evening, Luna approached him with a folder. Inside were outlines for a possible media campaign. A docuseries, a branded message, even a partnership with a justice nonprofit. Everything was polished, professional, and powerful. Keanu closed the folder and looked at her. "I already said what I needed to say," he told her. "Out there, in that moment." She nodded slowly, then smiled, and it echoed. In the weeks that followed, the boutique tried to rebuild. They repainted, they offered discounts, they posted new policies and hired a diversity consultant. But traffic slowed, and the atmosphere inside had changed. Even the most loyal clients could feel it. People were watching differently now, more carefully, and in homes across the country, elderly women who once felt invisible sat a little taller. There, daughters reminded them how valuable they were. Their grandsons asked questions they'd never asked before. One woman changed everything, not by shouting, not by demanding, but by standing in grace when the world tried to erase her. 2 weeks after the viral incident, Keanu walked into a small conference room tucked inside a modest community center in Los Feliz. There were no cameras, no media, and no red carpet. Just 4 chairs, a pot of coffee, and a whiteboard with a handwritten title at the top. The Open Door Fund. He sat at the table with Luna and 2 longtime friends from a grassroots nonprofit. Patricia had insisted on coming too. She brought cookies and a notepad filled with thoughts scribbled in gentle cursive. Keanu didn't want to start a campaign. He didn't want attention. He wanted something that would outlive the headlines. So he'd built it quietly, one idea at a time. The Open Door Fund wasn't flashy. There was no major sponsor, no celebrity gala. It started as a seed, a place where older citizens could gather, feel seen, and reconnect with spaces they were often pushed out of: fashion, art, technology, wellness, everything that had become saturated with youth and image. He pitched freestyling sessions in local malls, not to sell anything, but to allow older women and men to feel beautiful again. There were weekly cultural events with musicians and chefs. A partnership with a downtown art gallery offered VIP walkthroughs for seniors before public openings. Another venue agreed to open its doors one Sunday a month for quiet mornings, where those with mobility or sensory issues could explore without crowds. Every idea was rooted in one belief: people shouldn't have to look the part to be part of the world. Patricia offered to design the first workshop. She chose the name Full-Length Mirror. Her idea was simple: pair retired individuals with young stylists and let them talk, not just about clothing, but about life. 1 hour of conversation, one outfit, one portrait to take home. She said, "When you see yourself through someone else's kindness, something inside you changes." The first session was held in a borrowed boutique that agreed to donate their space for the afternoon. Dozens of volunteers showed up. So did 30 elders, most of them hesitant at first. But by the end of the day, there were hugs, tears, laughter, and mirrors filled with grace. News of the Open Door Fund began to trickle out, not through flashy announcements, but through word of mouth and quiet moments shared online. A young stylist posted a photo of herself beside a beaming 83-year-old woman in a bright blue blazer. The caption read, "She told me this was the first time in years someone asked her what made her feel beautiful." Another post showed an elderly man in a sharp gray suit holding a violin at one of the cultural events. He hadn't played in public in decades. Today, he played for 12 people. He cried, "We all did." Without trying, the project was becoming a movement. Donations began to arrive without Keanu ever asking. Former clients of the boutique who had watched the viral video began sponsoring events anonymously. A tailor from Pasadena offered to do free alterations for every senior who needed one. A downtown shoe shop pledged to donate comfort shoes in every size. A retired makeup artist offered to lead workshops on how to rediscover confidence through touch and tone. Still, Keanu never stepped into the spotlight. He turned down every press opportunity, every offer to be interviewed about the fund. When Luna asked if he might consider saying something on camera to encourage more donors, he shook his head and smiled. "The work is the answer," he said, "not the apology." Meanwhile, Franklin Braith's team contacted Luna with an invitation. They were hosting a reconciliation event at the boutique. Press, influencers, champagne. They wanted Keanu to appear, to speak, to shake hands. They called it an opportunity for healing. A new chapter. Keanu didn't even pause before answering. No, he didn't need a staged moment of peace to validate what he was building. Instead, that same day, he was at a local warehouse, helping volunteers unpack mirrors and clothing racks for the next event. Patricia stood beside him, folding scarves and chatting with a woman who had once worked in a department store 30 years ago. No cameras, no lights, just people who had once been pushed aside, now standing center stage in their own quiet way. That was the point. And nothing Franklin could offer in marble or marketing would ever match it. The second full-length mirror event took place in an old civic center turned temporary studio space. Rows of chairs lined the walls. Large full-body mirrors were propped up beside windows letting in the afternoon light. There was no luxury branding in sight, just paper name tags, soft jazz, and warm tea served in mismatched mugs. Keanu arrived early to help set up folding tables. Patricia greeted each new participant with the same quiet dignity she once carried through the boutique doors. Her list this time didn't hold gift ideas. It held names of volunteers, dietary needs, and a poem she planned to read aloud at the end of the day. By mid-morning, the room was filled with soft chatter, Retired teachers, widows, veterans, former artists, seamstresses. Each one partnered with a stylist or volunteer listener. One woman shared that she hadn't worn lipstick in 15 years. Another confessed that she missed wearing hats but always felt like they drew the wrong kind of attention. A man in his 90s told his stylist he once tailored suits in New York before arthritis forced him into retirement. He left that day wearing a suit jacket the stylist insisted he keep. Patricia moved between guests, sometimes offering a hand, sometimes just listening. Someone asked her how it felt to be the face of this whole movement. She shook her head and smiled. "I'm just the voice that got heard that day. But this room? These people? This is the real story." Outside, another video was circulating. It showed a compilation of quiet moments from the first two events. People smiling at their reflections, hugging strangers, dancing gently to old jazz tunes. It ended with a quote from Keanu's earlier words. "You don't have to know someone to treat them like they matter." The clip was picked up by community pages, nursing homes, school newsletters, and even churches. Parents began bringing their teenagers to help volunteer at future sessions. A small church in Atlanta replicated the program under a new name, the Welcome Hour. A high school in Arizona started their own version during lunch breaks, pairing students with seniors from a nearby retirement home for conversations on identity, aging, and self-worth. No one asked for credit. No one was waiting for a photo op. Back at the Civic Center, Franklin Braith quietly attended the third event. He didn't speak. He stayed in the back, dressed in a plain suit, no entourage, no statement. He watched as an 84-year-old woman stepped in front of the mirror, turned side to side, and whispered, "I forgot I used to love this color on me." He closed his eyes for a moment. He never approached Keanu. He left without saying a word. Later that evening, Patricia sat with Keanu beneath the stars outside the center. The air was crisp and the sky above them was clear. She sipped her tea and looked at him gently. "You didn't fix the store," she said. "No," Keanu replied. "But maybe we're fixing something bigger?" She nodded, her eyes reflecting the string lights overhead. "I think we are." From that night on, every full-length mirror event opened with Patricia's short poem. "You are not forgotten. You are not worn out. You are not less than. You are still becoming." And every time it was read, something in the room shifted, like the walls pulled back and the ceiling lifted just a little. Enough for people to stand up straighter. Enough to remind them that even in a world that often overlooked them, their reflection still mattered. The rented gallery was modest, tucked between a florist and a bookstore in a quiet stretch of Silver Lake. Its walls were bare, save for a few pieces on loan from local artists. Rows of folding chairs faced a small wooden podium under soft track lighting. A faint scent of lavender filled the space from a diffuser someone had set near the entrance. Everything felt quiet and warm, as if the room itself had been asked to hold something sacred. It was the first official open-door event open to the public, not just volunteers and friends of the foundation. Nearly 50 people had shown up. Most of them were older women, widows, grandmothers, retired school teachers. A few younger faces dotted the crowd, volunteers, caretakers, and students. They came not because of the viral video, but because they had heard whispers of something honest happening here. Patricia sat near the back at first, watching the people arrive. She wore a dark teal shawl over a soft gray dress and a simple silver locket around her neck. It was the same one Keanu had given her 2 birthdays ago, replacing the original lost years earlier. Luna stood near the front, organizing the program schedule and adjusting the mic. She turned to Patricia and nodded with encouragement. It was time. Patricia rose slowly, smoothing her dress with both hands. She made her way up to the podium, not quickly, but with presence. As she reached the microphone, the room quieted, every eye on her. She looked out at the gathered faces, some kind, some curious, some visibly nervous, and exhaled. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice small but clear. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said with a light smile. I mean, I wasn't supposed to be standing behind a microphone, speaking at an event that started with a misunderstanding outside a store. The room chuckled softly, breaking the tension. Her hands gripped the edge of the podium. I've never been someone who liked being looked at. I'm more of a listener. But something's been happening these past few weeks. Strangers writing letters, people stopping me in parking lots just to say, "I saw you." And I realized I've spent most of my life not wanting to be seen, and now that I've been seen, I don't want to disappear again. Patricia paused, gathering her breath. Her voice trembled slightly, but didn't falter. When I was turned away at that boutique, it wasn't the first time I'd felt invisible. It wasn't even the worst. But it was the first time someone else saw it happen and said, "That's not okay." My son saw it. And more than that, he listened. The room was silent. "Taylor didn't see me," she said slowly. "But my son did. And more importantly, I see myself now." Someone in the second row wiped a tear from her cheek. Another woman reached for her neighbor's hand. Patricia's eyes moved gently over the crowd. "I'm not a campaign. I'm not a movement. I'm just a woman who wanted to buy a gift. A woman who's worn the same coat for 10 years, who likes quiet corners in cafes and crossword puzzles in pen. But I've learned something through all of this. I've learned that there's nothing small about being treated with dignity." She paused again. "It's not weakness to want to feel lovely. It's not selfish to want to be noticed. We don't become less human as we age. We become deeper, wider, stronger." The audience nodded in agreement, some blinking back emotion. Patricia smiled gently, her fingers still holding the edge of the podium. "And this space, this event, this foundation, it isn't just for me. It's for every person who's ever been overlooked in a waiting room, ignored at a counter, talked down to in a store. It's for anyone who's ever walked into a room and felt like they needed to apologize for taking up space." A quiet yes rose from the back. Patricia looked down for a moment, then lifted her eyes again. "Today I want to say something simple to each of you. You are not an afterthought. You are not a burden. You are still here. And you still matter." The room erupted in applause. Not the loud, performative kind, but the kind that comes from deep agreement, from shared truth. People stood. Some clapped with both hands. Others simply held them to their hearts. And from the back of the room, where no one had been looking, Keanu wiped a tear from his cheek, then folded his hands in quiet pride. Patricia stepped back from the podium as the applause settled into a hush. She didn't bow or wave or gesture. She simply nodded and returned to her seat, where Luna reached out and gently squeezed her hand. The next speaker stood, but the energy in the room had already been shaped by what Patricia had said. It wasn't about the program anymore. It was about presence. About a woman who had once been overlooked, now leading others to reclaim their reflection. After the event, people lined up, not to take pictures, not to ask for autographs, but just to talk. Dozens of attendees approached Patricia with quiet words. "You reminded me of my mother," one woman said, tears pooling in her eyes. "She passed before I ever told her how much she gave me." A man with silver hair and a cane leaned in and whispered, "I used to be a manager. I retired and felt like I'd disappeared. You brought me back today." Even a teenage volunteer who had helped set up chairs asked if he could hug her. She did, holding him like a grandson. Luna captured a photo of it all. Patricia seated near the gallery window, bathed in light, surrounded by people of all ages leaning in, listening. That photo would become the signature image on the Open Door Fund's website, not because it was polished, but because it was real. As people began to trickle out, Keanu stayed behind, letting the others have their moments. When the room was nearly empty, he walked up to his mother and knelt beside her chair. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low and warm. She smiled. "I was terrified. No one could tell." She took his hand. "I never thought I'd find my voice again. she said. But I think maybe it was just waiting. Keanu looked at her with pride and something deeper, something like awe. You didn't just find it, he said. You gave it away so others could find theirs too. They sat there for a long moment, saying nothing else. Outside, the gallery lights dimmed and the sun lowered beyond the rooftops. But inside, something remained bright, a quiet kind of light. The kind that comes when someone finally sees themselves clearly and knows the world is beginning to see them too. It started slowly. At first, the boutique kept its doors open like nothing had happened. The music still played, the champagne still chilled, the floor staff still greeted regulars with practiced charm. But something had shifted beneath the surface. You could feel it in the air. The way customers paused before stepping through the door, the hesitation in their eyes, the tension in their posture. The boutique no longer felt exclusive. It felt exposed. Sales dropped gradually, then all at once. Long-time clients stopped returning calls. Stylists who once boasted about their work quietly updated their resumes. Invitations to high professional galas were ignored, and collaborations with other luxury brands fell apart. No one wanted to be the next headline. No one wanted to be caught defending a culture that had been so publicly dismantled with a single quiet moment. Franklin tried to counter the tide. He doubled down on discounts, brought in influencers to stage comeback photo shoots, launched a new inclusive campaign full of polished slogans and professionally lit videos. But the responses online were brutal. One comment read, "You can't rebrand your way out of rotten roots." Another, "Too late, the world saw who you are." Then the article came out. An anonymous former employee, under the pseudonym S, shared her experience in an op-ed published by a major magazine. She wrote of staff meetings where employees were told to assess customers within the first 3 seconds of entry. She wrote about older women being turned away with fake appointment rules, about interns instructed to steer products away from people in plain clothing. But the line that went viral was this: "We weren't trained to sell luxury. We were trained to sell superiority." That sentence pierced through the brand's last layer of defense. Suddenly, people didn't just dislike the store, they distrusted it. More ex-employees came forward, adding their voices to the record. The boutique's name trended for days, not for its clothing, but for its cruelty. Interviews were requested, but Franklin declined every one. He was no longer the polished face of a fashion empire. He was a cautionary tale, a man who built walls around status and watched them crumble when the truth walked through the front door. Claire's resignation came not through a press release, but in the form of a handwritten letter she posted on her personal blog. It read simply, "I thought I was doing my job. I thought I was protecting a brand. What I didn't realize was that I had stopped seeing people. I only saw status." She didn't excuse herself. She didn't shift blame. She wrote about how she'd watched the footage of herself turning Patricia away over and over, and how the worst part wasn't what she said, but how little she remembered saying it. Because that's how casual it had become, how normalized. Her post ended with a quiet confession. "I hope one day I'm treated better than I treated her, and I hope she knows I'm trying to change." The letter was shared widely, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. Some people criticized her, others offered grace, but one comment stood out, pinned at the top. "Apology accepted, but only if it becomes action." By then, foot traffic at the boutique had all but vanished. Tourists would still stop to take pictures, but not of the clothing. They took pictures of the door, of the gold-lettered sign, of the place where it happened. The once prized lease in the heart of Beverly Hills now felt like a burden. Within 6 months, Franklin sold it. He didn't make a statement. He didn't announce a farewell event. He simply handed the keys to the building's owners and walked away. No one cheered. No one protested. The boutique closed with the same sound it had once tried to silence others with: indifference. For a brief moment, the storefront stood empty. The windows were papered over, the marble floors inside were bare. But then, one day, a new sign appeared in the window. Hand-painted, nothing flashy, just 3 words written in clean white lettering. Common thread, coming soon. Below that, a smaller line, where everyone is worth weaving into the story. People stopped again, but this time they smiled. There was something about the name, the simplicity of it, the invitation hidden inside. The space wasn't erased. It was being rewritten, and this time, the doors would stay open. The new owner of the space was a young designer named Camila Rojas. She had grown up 10 blocks from that boutique, in a rent-controlled apartment above a bakery. As a teenager, she used to walk past its windows and stare in, wondering what it would feel like to belong inside a place like that. She never did. Even when she studied fashion on scholarship, even when her designs began turning heads at local markets, the idea of entering those glass doors felt too far away. But after the viral story, something shifted inside her. She didn't want to break into the fashion world. She wanted to rebuild it. When the lease became available, she applied with no expectations. But the building owner, moved by what had unfolded months earlier, saw something rare in her proposal. She wasn't just starting a clothing store. She was creating a platform. Common Thread launched quietly, but intentionally. No velvet ropes, no bouncers, no gold trim. The front display was a collection of mannequins. One wearing a thrifted blazer, another a handmade linen dress, another in jeans and a t-shirt. Above them hung a single sign that read, "Welcome to the place that remembered how to open the door." Camila stocked clothing from emerging designers who had never shown in traditional boutiques. She hosted weekly community nights, poetry readings, sewing workshops, open mics where people shared their stories, not their status. And she partnered with the Open Door Fund. Once a month, Common Thread closed to the public and opened only for elders and caretakers, offering private fittings, conversations, and listening sessions. Camila would often sit on the floor beside a chair, adjusting pant legs or measuring shoulders, telling the person in front of her, "You're not hard to fit, they just stopped designing for you." Keanu and Patricia visited quietly one afternoon. They walked the store with Camila, who told Patricia, "You weren't the spark. You were the match that lit the whole room." Patricia smiled gently. Camila added, "Thank you for reminding the rest of us to look up." The store flourished not by chasing prestige, but by honoring presence. Every sale felt like a conversation. Every stitch was sewn with memory. And in the place once known for who it kept out, a new kind of luxury emerged. Belonging. The morning of Patricia's birthday was quiet, just the way she liked it. The sun filtered gently through her kitchen curtains, casting soft light across the table where she sat with a cup of tea and a folded crossword. There were no balloons, no streamers, just a vase of wildflowers from her neighbor and a small chocolate cake waiting in the fridge. She didn't expect anything grand. She never did. So when Keanu knocked on the door just after 10, holding a simple brown gift box tied with twine, she smiled and shook her head. "You never forget," she said. "Wouldn't dare," he replied, stepping inside. They sat at the table, chatting the way they always had. About books, about the garden, about how the lavender was blooming late this year. He told her Luna had recently helped a young girl get her first public reading through the Open Door Fund. She smiled at that. Then, he placed the box in front of her. "Before you say anything," he said, "this isn't about fixing anything. It's just something that should have been yours a long time ago." Patricia looked at the box carefully, then untied the twine and opened it. Inside, nestled in soft linen, was the necklace. The one she had tried to buy months earlier, the one that had started everything. The silver chain gleamed softly in the light, and at its center was the small sapphire pendant she had admired through glass. Patricia's hand trembled as she lifted it. "You remembered," she whispered. "There's something inside," Keanu said. She gently opened the tiny locket behind the stone. Inside, instead of a photo, was a note, folded delicately. She opened it and read, "You already had the most priceless thing. Dignity." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Patricia placed the necklace around her neck with slow, steady hands. She touched the stone with her fingertips, her eyes misting but steady. She smiled, not for the necklace, not even for the gift, but for the full circle of it all, for what it had come to mean. She looked at him and said softly, "He really was raised right." Keanu kissed her forehead and replied, "By the best." They spent the rest of the morning on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the breeze carry petals from the rose bushes down the sidewalk. It wasn't a celebration by most people's standards, but it was perfect for them. Simple, still, and full of meaning. Patricia wore the necklace as if it had always been there, like it had simply returned home. "I used to think beauty faded with age," she said quietly. "But I think now, it just becomes quieter, more certain." Keanu nodded. "Like it no longer needs to be noticed to be real." She smiled at that. A blue jay landed on the fence and called out, breaking the silence for a moment before fluttering away. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photo. It was old, grainy and warm-toned. In it, Patricia held a 4-year-old Keanu at a street fair, both of them laughing, a half-eaten cotton candy in his hand and her eyes squinting in the sun. "I found this while cleaning out some boxes," he said. "You used to keep it in your wallet." "I did," she said. "It tore at the corner and I was afraid I'd lose it, so I tucked it away." She looked at it again, holding the memory in her hands. "I remember that day. You refused to ride the carousel unless I went with you. I remember thinking you were the bravest person in the world," he said. She looked over at him. "That's because you hadn't seen me try to balance on a moving horse, in heels." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from years of shared stories and unspoken affection. Patricia placed the photo gently inside a book resting on the table. She touched her necklace once more and said, "You know, I didn't cry that day at the boutique because of how they treated me. No, I cried because it confirmed a fear I'd carried quietly for years, that I had become invisible, that the world had passed me by." Keanu looked at her, his voice soft. "And now?" "Now," she said, "I know I was never the one who disappeared. They just stopped looking." The afternoon passed gently. Friends stopped by to leave cards and flowers on the porch. A neighbor's daughter brought over a tray of lemon tarts. But the best gift had already been given, the return of something far deeper than a necklace. Keanu stayed well into the evening, helping with the dishes after a small dinner and brewing tea the way she liked, strong, no sugar, with a slice of ginger. They sat together in the quiet hum of the house, the television off, the windows open to let in the breeze. As the sky turned amber, Patricia turned to her son. "I'm glad you didn't fight them," she said softly. Keanu looked at her, unsure. "You could have torn them down," she continued, publicly. "You had the power, but you didn't." He nodded slowly. "You taught me that anger leaves a scar, even when it's right." "I didn't want them to pay," she said. "I just wanted to feel like I mattered." "And now?" he asked. She touched the locket again. "Now I know I do." He reached over, gently taking her hand in his. "You've always mattered, Mom. The world's just finally catching up." She smiled and gave his hand a squeeze. There was a peacefulness in the air that felt earned, not manufactured, not fleeting. Patricia looked around her small home. The books, the framed photos, the small handwritten notes she kept pinned to the fridge. "I may not have diamonds," she said, "but I've had a life made of love." Keanu looked at her with tears pressing gently against the backs of his eyes. "The necklace," she began. He waited. "I'm going to wear it every day. Not because it's beautiful, but because of what it survived. The room went quiet again. Not heavy, just full. Later, as Keanu prepared to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at her. She stood in the same spot by the kitchen window where he'd seen her 100 times before. But now, the necklace shimmered at her collarbone like a crown. He smiled. "Happy birthday, Mom." She smiled back, radiant and sure. "Thank you, sweetheart." And as the door closed behind him and the evening deepened into twilight, Patricia reached up and touched the pendant once more, not to admire it, but to remind herself that even the smallest gift, when given with love, could carry the weight of redemption. A month after Patricia's birthday, a piece appeared in Le Monde that caught international attention. It was short, only 800 words, tucked between politics and global news. But the headline struck a chord across languages and borders. Hollywood star reminds us what class really is. The article, written by respected journalist Elodie Marchand, told the story not of fame, but of quiet rebellion. She didn't begin with the viral video. She began with Patricia, an elderly woman in a cardigan turned away at a luxury boutique, who never raised her voice, but left the world listening anyway. Elodie's article painted a picture of a son who responded not with fury, but with principle. She focused less on Keanu's celebrity and more on his refusal to weaponize it. She called it la dignité silencieuse, silent dignity. He did not shout, she wrote. He did not retaliate. He simply stood there, steady as a cathedral in a storm, and reminded everyone what grace looks like in real time. The piece went viral in France within a day. It was picked up by European outlets, translated into Italian, German, Portuguese. Soon it was featured in The Guardian, El País, and an op-ed in the New York Times. What surprised Keanu most was the reaction from educators and students. Letters came in from university professors in Belgium, from high school teachers in the UK, from social workers in rural Poland, all writing to say the same thing. We showed this to our students because it taught them something we couldn't put into a textbook. In response, Keanu received an invitation from a French cultural council to speak at a quiet gathering in Paris. It was not a red carpet affair. No press, no cameras, no honorary titles. Just a roundtable discussion on dignity, humanity, and what the French called le pouvoir tranquille, quiet power. At first, Keanu hesitated. He didn't want to be the face of something he never set out to lead. But after speaking with Patricia, who simply said, "Sometimes your silence teaches more than your presence. But sometimes your presence gives others the courage to speak," he agreed to attend. He packed light, no suit, no entourage, just a notebook and an open heart. The gathering took place in a modest salon inside an old Parisian building, once a library, now used for community dialogues and cultural events. The chairs were arranged in a wide circle beneath a chandelier that had seen centuries. There were no name cards, no velvet ropes, just simple white flowers on a table and warm croissants placed near the coffee. Around Keanu sat philosophers, poets, filmmakers, teachers. Some were well known in Europe, others local thinkers who had worked in quiet advocacy for decades. The theme of the evening was La valeur humaine dans un monde de masques, the value of humanity in a world of masks. Keanu didn't sit in the center. He chose a seat near the window, where the late autumn sun spilled across the floor. As the discussion began, voices rose slowly, reflections on how modern society prioritizes visibility over virtue and how status often trumps sincerity. One philosopher spoke about the erasure of the elderly in public life. A young teacher shared a story about her students crying after watching Patricia's video, saying it reminded them of their own grandparents being ignored. Keanu listened, quietly, fully. When a moderator offered him the floor, he shook his head. "I'm just here to learn," he said. The room respected that. The evening continued with stories, with ideas, with laughter. There were no declarations or slogans, only questions. How do we build spaces that welcome? How do we practice dignity as an action, not a posture? As the final speaker closed, a few attendees turned to Keanu again, this time not as a celebrity, but as a peer. A filmmaker asked, "Do you have any words you'd be willing to leave us with?" Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke one sentence. "Change doesn't need a microphone," he said, "just consistency." That was all. A few nodded. One man whispered, "Louis," under his breath. It wasn't profound because it was clever. It was profound because it was true and earned. Afterward, Keanu helped gather the empty cups and fold a few chairs. Someone handed him a handwritten note in French that simply read, "Merci d'avoir porté votre silence avec tant de lumière." Thank you for carrying your silence with so much light. Back in California, Patricia sat in her armchair, the television glowing softly in the corner of the room. A French news segment was playing, dubbed in English. The anchor spoke about the gathering in Paris, showing footage of the old salon where thinkers and artists had come together to discuss the meaning of quiet dignity. Then they showed a single still image, Keanu sitting by a window, dressed simply, notebook in hand, half smiling as he listened. Patricia leaned forward, recognizing the way his shoulders sat, relaxed but alert, the way he didn't seek the spotlight, but never hid from it either. She turned up the volume just in time to hear the anchor quote him. "Change doesn't need a microphone, just consistency." Her eyes filled, and not from pride alone. There was something else. Recognition. Of the little boy who used to wait for her outside the library. The teenager who gave his bus seat to elders without being asked. The man who never forgot where he came from, no matter where the world tried to take him. The screen shifted to an interview with a Parisian attendee, a gray-haired woman who said through a translator, "We live in a time where silence is mistaken for weakness, but tonight reminded me that the quiet ones still hold the match that lights the room." Patricia sat back and smiled. She glanced toward the bookshelf, where the photo of her and Keanu from the Civic Center still stood. Next to it, the necklace lay in a small velvet box, its chain coiled like a resting thread, its stone catching the low light. She didn't wear it every day anymore. She didn't need to, because the weight it once carried had been passed on, not through bitterness or blame, but through choice, through acts, through consistency. She turned off the television and looked out the window, where the garden swayed gently in the early evening breeze. The lavender bush bent, then straightened again. She whispered to herself, "He's still becoming," not because he lacked something, but because he never stopped learning, and neither had she. The world may have seen Keanu Reeves as a Hollywood icon, but in her heart, he was still the boy who brought her tea on rainy days, who asked questions others overlooked, who stood up not to be seen, but because someone else wasn't. And that kind of son, that kind of man, didn't need a microphone, because his life had already become the message. In a quiet classroom tucked inside a public middle school in Portland, Oregon, a teacher named Mrs. Garland stood in front of her 8th grade students and queued up a video on the projector. It was a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of day when students fidgeted and stared out the window, thinking more about lunch than literature. But today Mrs. Garland had planned something different. She had stumbled across Patricia's story weeks earlier and had carried it with her, unsure of when or how to share it. Now, with a unit focused on empathy and identity, she knew the time was right. The video played without commentary. The students watched as an older woman approached a boutique, only to be turned away. They saw the follow-up clip, Keanu Reeves confronting the boutique's owner with quiet strength. And finally, they saw a short segment from Patricia's open-door speech. When the lights came back on, the room was still. A boy in the second row raised his hand. "He reminds me of my grandma," he said. "She has that same walk, kind of slow but proud, like she's been through stuff and won't talk about it, but it's still there." Another student, a girl with dark braids, nodded. That necklace. It wasn't just a gift, it was like proof, like she finally got seen. Mrs. Garland smiled and asked them to take out their journals. "Today," she said, "I want you to write about someone you think the world doesn't see enough of. It could be a family member, a neighbor, someone from history, but focus on what people miss when they don't look closely." The students opened their notebooks, and for the next 20 minutes the only sound was pencil scratching on paper. One essay stood out. It began with a simple line: "Don't judge the shoes, listen to the steps they've walked." The student wrote about how their grandmother wore the same faded sneakers every day and how other kids mocked her. But those sneakers had carried her through years of working double shifts, raising 3 kids alone, and surviving breast cancer without complaint. "She walks slow," the essay read, "but her steps echo louder than most people's words." Mrs. Garland asked the student if she could share the essay first with the class, then with a broader audience. With permission, she emailed it to the Open Door Fund's community inbox. Luna opened the message late one evening and read it twice before forwarding it to Patricia. The subject line read, "From a student who saw you." Patricia printed the essay and placed it beside her reading chair. She reread the phrase over and over. Her steps echo louder than most people's words. She didn't cry. She just sat very still, letting the truth of it settle inside her like warmth after a long storm. In the days that followed, more letters began arriving. Some came from classrooms like the one in Portland, others from church groups, senior homes, book clubs, and individuals who had simply seen the video and couldn't forget it. One letter came from a teenager in Canada who wrote, "I'm scared of getting older, but you make it look powerful." Another came from a man who said he hadn't spoken to his mother in 3 years. "I called her today, thank you." Patricia kept every letter. At first they went into a shoebox, then into a wooden drawer in the hallway. But when she received one particular envelope, no return address, no city, just a single line of handwriting across the front, she knew it was different. Inside was a simple, folded sheet of paper. No signature, no decoration, only a line, written with firm, elegant penmanship. "Thank you for not disappearing." Patricia read it aloud to herself 3 times. She placed it in a frame. She didn't frame it because it praised her. She framed it because it understood her. Because, for years, she had felt herself shrinking beneath the noise of the world, beneath the rush of younger voices, louder demands, shinier things. And now, someone out there had spoken the sentence she hadn't even known she needed. It became a quiet centerpiece in her home. Not on the mantel, not in the hallway, but right beside the front door. So she would see it each time she left, and each time she returned. And remember that she hadn't disappeared. She had simply waited long enough to be seen. Word of Patricia's framed letter traveled quietly through the Open Door Fund's volunteer network. One day, a local photographer named Eli asked if he could stop by to document it for a series on objects that spoke louder than people. Patricia agreed, though with her usual condition: no fuss. He arrived on a soft Saturday morning with nothing but his camera and a warm smile. As he stepped inside, he paused to look at the letter by the door. He didn't touch it, just stood there. "It's perfect," he said. He took a single photo. No flash, no rearranging. When he was done, he sat across from Patricia and asked, "What do you think they meant?" The person who wrote it. Patricia looked at the frame for a long moment before answering. "I think they meant, thank you for staying soft in a world that keeps trying to harden you. Thank you for walking through the noise and not letting it change your pace." Eli nodded. "That's what the photo says too." The photo was eventually featured in a gallery exhibit titled The Quiet Ones, alongside portraits of grandmothers, janitors, retired nurses, old couples dancing in parks. It wasn't flashy, but it became the most visited room in the gallery. People stood for long stretches in front of the framed letter, reading it, whispering about it, taking pictures they never posted, just kept. Students who visited the gallery began calling her the old woman in the photo, but not with disrespect, with reverence, as though she had come to symbolize something they hadn't known they were missing. In the months that followed, a small group of students at that Portland school created their own initiative called Echo Steps. They left anonymous notes of affirmation taped to lockers and bathroom mirrors, library books, and desk drawers. One note read, "You are not your shoes. You are the miles they've carried." Another said, "If the world doesn't see you, whisper anyway. Someone will hear." Patricia received a package from the class with photocopies of every single one. She placed them in a binder marked "For Days That Need Reminding." But she kept the original framed note exactly where it was, because every time she opened the door to leave the house, she passed it. And every time she returned, she saw it again. A quiet sentence. A loud truth. "Thank you for not disappearing." The house was quiet. A gentle breeze moved through the open kitchen window, carrying the faint scent of rosemary from the garden. Patricia sat at her small desk, the same one she'd used for years to pay bills, write thank you notes, and pen the occasional memory when it felt too sacred to let fade. Today, the pages of her journal lay open, untouched, waiting. The sunlight landed softly across the desk as she picked up her pen and sat back in her chair. Her hands were slower now, more careful in motion, but the thoughts in her mind still moved with clarity. Over the past year, she had watched something unfold, not just in the world around her, but in herself. She had gone from overlooked to remembered, not because of what she demanded, but because of how she chose to remain. She didn't write about the boutique, or the necklace, or the headlines. She wrote about her son. She titled the page "Legacy," then underlined it once. The ink glided gently across the paper as she began. "Dear Keanu." She paused. "If they ever forget who you are, let them remember how you made people feel." She stopped again, rereading the line, then nodded softly. She continued, "You were never the loudest person in the room, never the one to push others aside to be seen. You watched first. You listened. You offered kindness before it was earned. The world tried to teach you to chase power, but you always chose presence instead." She tapped the pen gently on the desk. "I don't know how long I'll be here, sweetheart, but I need you to know that what you did for me, what you helped the world see, wasn't about a moment. It was about a mirror. You held it up, and because of that, people like me felt visible again." Patricia placed the pen down and folded the page gently, creasing it with both hands. She reached into the drawer of the desk and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the necklace. She placed the note beneath the pouch and closed the drawer slowly. Then she reached for a photo on the shelf above, one of her and Keanu, seated on a park bench, both of them laughing, sunlight in their eyes. She placed it gently beside the drawer. The photo had been taken years earlier, before any of this. It was a Sunday afternoon. They had been walking through a public garden when Patricia sat down, tired but happy. Keanu had joined her, leaning back with his arms stretched along the bench. A stranger walking by had offered to take their picture. They had said yes, though Patricia had hesitated at first, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. In the picture, her laughter is caught mid-breath, and Keanu's head is tilted toward her like he's just said something only she would understand. It wasn't posed, it wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Patricia looked at it now and whispered, "Still my favorite one." She stood and moved slowly to the bookshelf, pulling down a worn leather journal filled with decades of scribbles, recipes, quotes, shopping lists, and memories. She flipped to a blank page near the back and began writing again, this time less formal, more like a note to herself. "There are things I want him to find when I'm no longer around, not because he needs them, but because I want him to know I left quietly, with peace in my chest." She thought for a moment. Then she wrote, "Tell him to use the garden. Don't let it go wild. It's the only place where I always felt centered. Tell him the teacups in the top cabinet are chipped but still beautiful. like us. Tell him I watched him grow into the kind of man the world forgets how to be." When she was finished, she closed the journal and placed it next to the photo. She didn't cry. She didn't dwell. It wasn't about sadness. It was about readiness. About leaving behind not just objects, but reminders. Not of what she had survived, but of what she had believed in. She returned to the drawer and opened it one more time. The necklace, the note, the folded photograph, each placed intentionally, not as parting gifts, but as anchors. Soft truths wrapped in quiet love. Then she gently closed it again and sat by the window, where the afternoon sun was beginning to bend into gold. As the light shifted across the floorboards, Patricia leaned back in her chair and listened to the soft ticking of the clock above the kitchen. It was a sound she had grown to love. Constant, unfailing, never in a rush. The kind of rhythm she had lived her life by. Time, she thought, was not the thief people feared it to be. Time, when held gently, became a container for memory, and memory, when shared with love, became legacy. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply, letting her shoulders relax. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers intertwined as if holding on to something invisible. She didn't need to leave a fortune. She didn't need to leave behind fanfare or famous words. She had already done what mattered. She had stayed kind. She had stayed whole. And now, she had made sure that when the time came, her son wouldn't find emptiness. He would find echoes. Later that evening, Keanu stopped by with groceries. She met him at the door, smiled, and offered him tea like she always did. They sat at the kitchen table again, as they had so many times before. He told her about a recent open-door event. She told him about the tomatoes coming in late this year. Neither of them mentioned the drawer. She didn't need to. He didn't need to ask. But as he stood to leave, he caught a glimpse of the photo on the desk, him and Patricia on the bench, mid-laugh. He smiled. "I still remember what made you laugh in that picture," he said. She looked over, her smile mirroring his. "It was something about squirrels." "No," he said. "It was you telling me that no matter how grown I got, you'd still make me hold your purse at the grocery store." She laughed again. "Still true." He bent down and kissed her forehead, gently. "I love you, Mom." "I know," she said, "and I love who you've become." He left into the evening, the sound of the screen door closing behind him like a soft punctuation mark. Patricia turned off the lights, leaving just one lamp on by the hallway. As she walked past the drawer where the necklace and the letter lay waiting, she paused, not to open it, just to rest her hand on it, as if sealing something in place. And then she whispered to herself, "He'll know. When it's time, he'll know." The boutique had a different name now, Verity. The letters were etched into the glass in gold leaf, elegant and quiet. The building that once held Franklin's had been completely transformed, but something about it still held her presence. The wooden doors opened with a soft chime that sounded nothing like the old bell Patricia used to complain about, yet somehow it made Keanu's heart flutter with the same familiar pang. Inside, it smelled of lavender and cedar. Warm light spilled through the skylight overhead, illuminating displays that were tastefully arranged with local artisan goods, sustainable fabrics, and quiet luxury. The floor had been refinished, but the original beams overhead remained. He noticed that detail instantly. Patricia had always loved those beams. She used to say they held stories in their grains, as if every knot had once been a whisper of some forgotten truth. A young woman behind the counter looked up from her register. Her smile was immediate, not the practiced kind, but something real. "You must be Keanu," she said gently. He nodded, taken aback, unsure how she knew. She stepped forward and motioned toward a corner of the shop. There, beside a soft velvet chair and a vase of white tulips, stood a simple black frame on a pedestal. Inside it was a photograph. Patricia. Laughing, the wind had caught her hair. Her eyes were closed in joy. "My name's Nadine," the woman said. "I bought the shop 3 years ago. Your mother's story, what she did here, changed everything. It's why I opened Verity." Keanu didn't speak. His throat was too tight. Nadine didn't press. She just offered him the velvet chair and slipped away to give him space. He sat, barely breathing. The photo caught the light just right. There was no plaque, no fanfare. Just her. Unapologetically, herself. He remembered the way she used to sit in the back office, legs tucked under her, scribbling notes in the margins of catalogs and humming along to whatever old jazz record she had on. She never chased trends. She chased dignity. And now, long after she was gone, that legacy lived on in quiet corners like this one. Keanu leaned back in the chair and let his gaze drift slowly across the boutique. Every detail seemed intentional. There were no loud displays, no pushy marketing signs, just warmth. It wasn't trying to impress, it was trying to mean something. That's what Patricia always believed fashion should be. Not noise, but expression. Not power, but grace. A soft laugh from the back drew his attention. A teenage girl and her mother were browsing near a table of hand-woven scarves. The girl held one up, turning to her mom with a look of pride. "This is the one. It's exactly what I imagined." Her mother smiled and nodded. "It's beautiful, sweetie." Keanu felt something stir. He could almost hear Patricia's voice, whispering, saying how important it was for women to feel seen, to feel chosen, not by others, but by themselves. That belief had stitched itself into every hem she ever touched. Nadine returned a few minutes later holding a small book. She handed it to him wordlessly. It was one of Patricia's original lookbooks, faded, dog-eared, full of handwritten notes in blue ink, quotes in the margins, fabric swatches taped to the pages. One note on the inside cover read, "Beauty's never loud, it waits to be noticed." Keanu ran his thumb over the writing and exhaled slowly. The room around him blurred for a moment. He blinked and cleared his throat. "She never stopped believing in people," he said quietly, "even when they gave her every reason not to." Nadine nodded. "I didn't know her, but I feel like I do. The women who come in here, mothers, daughters, even grandmothers, say they feel safe here, seen." That came from her. Keanu gently closed the book and placed it back into Nadine's hands. He didn't need to buy anything. He had already received more than any transaction could offer. He stood up and gave the boutique one last look. The beams, the photograph, the stillness. As he walked toward the door, he passed a young man holding it open for an older woman in a wide-brimmed hat. She smiled at him, touched his shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you." Keanu paused just outside, watching that simple exchange. And then he smiled. The sidewalk outside was sun-warmed and quiet, just as it had been all those years ago. But something was different now. Not in the buildings or the street, but in the air. There was a stillness, yes, but not the heavy kind that follows grief. This stillness felt like reverence. Keanu lingered by the storefront window, watching the people inside move gently through the space. A mother showing her daughter how to check fabric quality, a young couple laughing quietly over matching bracelets, the teenage girl from earlier twirling her scarf in front of the mirror, her reflection calm and sure. He remembered how Patricia used to say, "If we can just make one person feel worthy when they walk through those doors, we've done something sacred." It hadn't felt sacred at the time, just retail, just hours and late nights and vendor calls. But standing here now, watching strangers walk into a place she no longer lived in and still feel her spirit, that was sacred. More than anything he could touch. A breeze lifted his coat slightly. The scent of tulips and wood polish still clung to him. A small girl walked past, holding her grandmother's hand. She dropped her mitten, and Keanu bent down and picked it up, offering it back to her with a kind smile. The grandmother thanked him and nodded slowly, her eyes resting on his face with soft recognition. "Your mother," she said. "She helped me find a dress once. I just lost my hair to chemo. I didn't feel like myself. She made me feel beautiful again." Keanu's chest tightened. He didn't reply. He just placed a hand over his heart and bowed his head slightly. The woman squeezed his arm once, then walked away. He turned back toward the boutique one final time. In the window was a small card in a stand. It simply read, "Kindness is never wasted. Patricia Reeves." He didn't need a monument or a statue. This was enough. The world didn't change overnight, but it changed moment by moment when people remembered what mattered. A door opened behind him and a soft bell rang. Another customer stepped inside. Another chance. And as Keanu walked away down the block, his hands in his pockets, his smile said everything. The world was learning. The leather-bound journal lay open on the desk, beside a cup of cooling tea. Keanu sat in the quiet of his home office, a single lamp casting soft light across the page. The city outside his window buzzed with distant movement, but in here, it was still. The kind of still that lets memories settle gently into words. His pen moved slowly, each stroke deliberate. Inway didn't reject a customer, they rejected compassion. He paused, letting that sentence breathe. It had taken years to understand what really happened that day in the boutique. The incident had been so public, so sharp with humiliation, that it was easy to mistake it for something shallow, a bad store policy, a rude manager. But it wasn't about the dress. Not really. It was about something deeper, something that no receipt could fix. Patricia had taught him early on that human dignity wasn't tied to appearances. She often said, "People might forget what you wore, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." She believed in elegance, but not for the sake of fashion. She believed in it as a form of honoring the self and others. Keanu's next lines were quieter, more personal. Respect isn't about fabric or money. It's about recognition. The sacred act of seeing each other, not for status or beauty or utility, but simply for being. He thought about Nadine, carrying forward his mother's mission without ever having known her. About the woman whose smile returned after chemo because someone reminded her she was still beautiful. About the young man who held the door with instinctive decency. None of them were loud about it. None of them posted it or chased credit. But they were the ones reshaping the world, one small act at a time. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. What had started as a memory had become something else, a lesson that echoed across years, across grief, across silence. Picking up the pen again, he wrote what would be the final line of the entry. "The world doesn't change with fury, it changes when we dare to be kind anyway." He put the pen down and closed the journal slowly, letting the words settle like dust on a sacred floor. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Memories lived here. So did intention. Keanu moved to the bookshelf and placed the journal beside a small photograph of his mother. Not the one from the boutique, the public one, but an older image. Candid. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of their apartment, hair in a loose bun, measuring fabric with her hands and smiling at nothing in particular. Just content, just present. He stayed there for a moment, watching her stillness, remembering her laugh, remembering the way she used to pull him aside when he was younger and say, "Don't be polite, be kind." There's a difference. He had spent so much of his life in front of cameras, surrounded by scripts, stage directions, applause, but none of that felt real in moments like this. What stayed with him wasn't fame or fortune. It was the feeling of someone believing in him when he didn't yet believe in himself. That was his mother's legacy, not stitched into clothing, but into people. Outside the window, the sun was starting to dip behind the buildings, casting golden light across the horizon. He could see a child on the sidewalk below handing a flower to a passerby. No transaction, just a gesture. The woman receiving it looked surprised, then touched. Her entire posture changed. That was it. That was everything. Keanu returned to the desk and ran a hand over the closed journal, then looked at the camera he'd left on the shelf nearby. He hadn't planned on recording anything tonight, but maybe now was the right time. Not for a performance, not for a promotion. Just a reflection. Something honest. He clicked it on and sat down in front of the lens. No lighting set up. No prepared speech. Just him. He spoke softly. If someone made you feel seen, even once, you never forget it. That feeling becomes part of you. You carry it into every room, every choice, every silence. He nodded slightly, his voice calm and steady. And if the world forgets how to treat each other with dignity, maybe the answer isn't shouting louder. Maybe it's listening harder and acting softer. Then he paused, letting the silence hold the weight. Keanu leaned slightly forward toward the camera. I've seen fame build walls between people. I've seen money distract us from the truth that we all bleed the same, break the same, hope the same. But I've also seen a woman offer a scarf to someone shivering. I've seen a stranger protect another without asking for anything in return. Those moments don't trend, but they matter. He drew a quiet breath, eyes steady. I didn't share this story to reopen old wounds. I shared it because sometimes we forget how powerful gentleness can be, not just in grand gestures, but in the smallest ones. A held door, a kind word, a refusal to turn away. The light from the desk lamp flickered slightly, casting his face in soft shadows. He looked almost tired, but not from weariness, more like someone who had carried something long enough and was finally setting it down. My mother didn't try to change the world. She tried to see it clearly, and because she did, she helped others see themselves more clearly too. That's the legacy I hope to carry. He looked down for a moment, then back into the camera. If you're watching this, maybe there's someone in your life who needs that kind of dignity. Maybe it's you. Either way, I hope you remember this. He reached over and held up the journal one more time. The world doesn't change with fury. It changes when we dare to be kind anyway. He ended the video there. No music, no dramatic cut. Just truth. That night, after uploading the clip quietly under a reflective title, he went for a walk. The city felt softer somehow. Not fixed, not perfect, but maybe, just maybe, healing. And somewhere, a mother's laughter still echoed in the way people treated each other. Have you ever witnessed someone quietly stand up for dignity? What kind of story would you like to see Keanu in next? Let us know in the comments.